When we think of China, the first image comes to the mind is that of the famous Wall of China. The Great Wall emerged in 221 BC in the process of unification of smaller states having their own defensive walls. It was built with the purpose to keep out the northern nomadic tribes rampaging the countryside. But it really did not stop the Mughal and the Manchus from establishing their dynastic rule. Today, the wall is overrun by the tourists. Majority of them are local. For we Indians, the China's image is that of a yellow dragon lurking on our northern border. And who can forget the tank man of Tiananmen Square? Tiananmen, the gate of heavenly peace, has witnessed many royal events, and later, in 1949, the proclamation of People's Republic of China by Mao Zedong, and in 1989, democracy movement in which millions participated and thousands perished. The majestic pillar is the monument of the people's hero, with fine calligraphy of Mao's thoughts. The Tiananmen Gate guards the Forbidden City, where, till early decades of 20th century, the Son of Heaven, Dragon King, stayed and ruled China.
瞧，瞧，午门到了。
sites, they've been used as the Imperial treasure houses. So for example, what we have here, they have the
The emperors were concerned about the afterlife and so commissioned the construction of mausoleum in their lifetime. With strong belief in feng shui, the Ming dynasty emperors chose the site with care in the valley basin of Tianshu mountain. 13 Ming emperors had their tombs in this area. The sacred way or the spirit path leads to the prayer area, but the actual burial site is unmarked and concealed. The Dingling Tomb, the tomb of stability of 1620 Emperor Wanli, was excavated in 1959. It suffered from poor documentation and storage of artifacts. It is an underground palace with many chambers and a dragon throne. The excavation work was vandalized in the Cultural Revolution of the 60s. The mortal remains of the Emperor Wanli and the two empresses were posthumously denounced and burnt. The obsession of afterlife goes back in history. The Terracotta Army at Xi'an from the Qin dynasty emperor Qin Shi Huang tomb is the best example of it. The project was completed around 210 BC. The warriors carrying bronze and iron weapons were supposed to protect and defend the emperor. The project took years to complete. The earlier warrior figures are larger than life, almost reaching to a height of 7 feet. But the later period figures are smaller, just about 4 feet. The warriors in the pit had a ceiling of wooden logs, and then the pit was closed. But the warriors' pits were vandalized just within 4 years, for the bronze weapons and the warriors themselves were broken into pieces. A single figure of an archer was found without any damage. The Terracotta Warriors are painstakingly restored, and the work is still under progress. Going further back in history to the period of Eastern Zhou dynasty, 770 BC to 256 BC, the royal tombs had the live horses buried in the place of terracotta horses as in Qin dynasty. Their capital was near Luoyang. The Tianzi Jialiu Museum has the artifacts from this period. The emperor's chariot was drawn by 6 horses. Lesser officers and noblemen had chariots drawn by 4 and 2 horses. All the emperors longed for longevity. The symbol of longevity the turtle, is seen in monuments and temples. On the shores of Lake Kunmin is the Summer Palace and the Longevity Hill, where emperors prayed. A covered corridor painted with rural scenes from different regions of China leads to the Longevity Hill from Summer Palace. The Buddhism was introduced in 67 AD on the arrival of two Indian monks, Kashyap Matang and Dharmaratna in Luoyang. They arrived on the invitation of the Han dynastic emperor Mang Di. The monks carried many Buddhist texts and relics on two white horses. Kashyapa Matan translated the Sutra of 42 chapters. This is the first translation of Buddhist texts in Chinese. To honor the monks, the emperor built a temple. The statues of two white horses were installed near the gate. The temple is known as White Horse Temple. Most of the Buddhist temples in China follow a plan of halls and courtyards. In the first courtyard, there are bell and drum towers. The first hall is of celestial guardians, equivalent to Dikpals in Indian temples. It also houses Maitreya, or sometimes the Laughing Buddha. In the temple complex, other countries had dedicated temples to commemorate the arrival of Buddhism in China. In 2008, India constructed a replica of Sanchi Stupa. In 517 AD, another Buddhist monk, Bodhidharma, arrived in Luoyang in the northern Wei dynasty period. He was a Dhyan or meditation master. For 9 years, he was in a deep meditation. When he came out of it, he took some body postures to revitalize his body. These postures are basis of Kung Fu martial art. The temple, where monks evolved and practiced martial art as a form of meditation, the Shaolin Temple, is at the base of Sonshan mountain. In the later period, they became the protectors of Dharma and the emperor. In 652 AD, after a journey of 17 years to India and back, the legendary traveler and monk Huang Sang returned to Xi'an under Tang dynasty. He spent 10 years traveling in India. He visited and studied at various monasteries and at Nalanda University. This was the period of King Harshavardhan. He wrote a book of his journey, Pilgrimage to the West. This book is an important source to trace the history of India in that era. It is so accurate in details that many of the structures in Nalanda were excavated following the information. With a team of monks, he translated 1335 volumes of Buddhist texts written in Sanskrit and Pali into Chinese. As a depository of the sacred texts, a pagoda was constructed. From northern Wei dynasty onwards, Buddhism acquired wider acceptance. Around 500 AD, the works on Longmen Grottoes, that is Dragon Mouth Grottoes, was started on the banks of river Yi near Luoyang. It continued for 400 years through the dynastic period of Sui, Tang and Song dynasties. It is spread over 1 kilometer in length. There are about 2300 caves and niches and over 1 lakh Buddha images ranging in size from 2 centimeters to 17 meters. This is the earliest cave from Longmen Grotto from 495 AD Northern Wei dynasty. The 10,000 Buddha cave is from Tang dynasty. The figures carved in Wei dynasty are leaner and having longer faces compared to that in Tang dynasty. The Lotus Flower Cave is from Wei dynasty period. Being at lower elevation, it was damaged by occasional high flooding of river Yi. Feng Xiang Temple is an example of fine craftsmanship and grand layout. It is from Tang dynasty period. It was completed in 675 AD. The central seated figure of Dhyani Buddha Virokana is 17 meter high. It is flanked by disciples Anand on the left and Mahakashyap on the right. There are other celestial guardian bodhisattvas on the sides. The Longmen Grottoes is a fine example of Buddhist heritage of China. All religious activities were banned during the Cultural Revolution by the Red Guards. Today, we see a different picture. Like the return of Christianity in Russia, we see acceptance of Buddhism in China. Even the top leaders of China are seen with the chief monk of Jade Buddha temple in Shanghai.